Well, hello there. I'm an OG and this is the recap-ish end video of my Oblivion testing content series, if you can call it that. Do I have something interesting to show you? Kinda. Almost everyone knows about Alban Coronis and his dialogue voiced by Todd, right? Well, what if instead of Alban, this NPC got well known? Or this one? Or this one? Yeah, these guys also have this Todd dialogue attached, but they aren't placed in any test cells. Then there's also some NPCs that were meant to test various races, often being based on existing NPCs such as Tarmina, Manamarco, Burzgrokash or Hazatil. There are also two NPCs that are part of an unused vampire race, but they don't really bring anything to the table either. Some dudes to test how faces influence helmets, this woman who was probably used for this loading screen art, a ton more with even less interesting things about them. But what I really wanted to show is something else I've been working on that made a better quote-unquote finale for this series. The majority of what I've covered in this series is now available on the cutting room floor to sift through. When I was covering this stuff, I didn't really realize, but looking at it like this and realizing there are 132 unused NPCs in the base game of Oblivion, that's kinda crazy. The most NPCs of a single race in Oblivion are numbered 260, those being Imperials. The total number of Argonians, Dark Elves, High Elves, Khajiit, Nords, Orcs, Redguards and Wood Elves are all less than this. Only Bretons have a barely higher total of 136. The Orcs have the lowest total of only 62 NPCs, and not even all of those are named. I just find that whole number to be complete insanity. If you just scroll down this list here, you'll be completely overwhelmed, and this is only the vanilla content. I've only covered some of the stuff from my videos here. No testing halls, no warehouse cells, and no Shivering Isles content. While I will get around to covering that, as for now only this much was needed to make my point. Do you know how many test NPCs Morrowind had? 8. No ifs or buts, just 8. Okay, you might argue that Morrowind is an old game that didn't need as much testing. Then let's look at Skyrim. How many test NPCs do you think linger around in that game's files? Anyone? 13. Yeah, just 13 test NPCs for a game arguably way more taxing than Oblivion. If you couldn't see my point coming from a mile away, Oblivion's test stuff was mostly left in there by choice. Or so it would seem. I guess that maybe someone was to delete it all by the end, but never got around to it. Or maybe they just didn't think it would matter. I don't know for sure, but it's so weird when you hear developers say they had issues with a game's memory space, but then leave this much unneeded junk in the files. Of course, I don't think these cells, items, NPCs, etc. take up that much space. But didn't the developers think it was annoying having all this stuff cluttering up the files? Even Fallout New Vegas, a game infamous for it needing to be done quite fast, only has about 29 test NPCs in its files, 6 test cells and 1 test world. And in this game it was even more essential to not clutter up the files because it was so difficult to make it run on the consoles at the time. Now, one might once again argue that a lot of Fallout 3 legacy content clutters up New Vegas' files, but I can kinda understand it there. The developers didn't know what they might need to reuse in the future. But for Oblivion, there is no such excuse. I'm just honest to God baffled. They could have just removed the testing stuff in an update and no one would be any wiser. But they didn't! I don't know what to say to that. I guess on the one hand, we should be lucky, as how often can one get such a big haul of testing content like this? But on the other hand, this is just testing stuff that's mostly irrelevant by this point, so it shouldn't even be here to begin with. And well, I suppose that's the end of the story. It began with me having a slight interest in those test cells I would often see in the construction set, and it ended with me having to stay indoors due to chest pains, and in a week flat creating the number 80 longest page of all time on the cutting room floor. And that's saying a lot because most of those other long pages just contain source code or language files, while mine is just me pumping out info like a derelict robot factory worker. Still, it gives a nice feeling of completion. And after all, if I can prevent even one scummy clickbait YouTuber from making a video full of incorrect statements if they just lift their information straight from my sources, then I'm happy. So yeah, I've been OG and stay tuned for some, at least in my eyes, exciting cut content in the nearby future.